Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we will be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the New York Knicks, but before we do that, I want to talk about a guy who really excelled in that game, Jamal Shead. And I know that there is a ton of stuff happening around the NBA right now. We are very close to the trade deadline. Probably when you get this video, there might have been a big trade that's gone down. So in the interest of making sure that the content that I'm making right now is not immediately obsolete by the time the video releases, I'm not really going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors in terms of the trades that could potentially be made. So I don't want to waste your time. I want to talk about stuff that's pertinent. So that's kind of the reason that we'll be discussing Jamal Shead right now, because he is really the surprise of the season, I would say. When the Toronto Raptors drafted Jamal Shead 45th overall in this past year's draft, I wasn't a huge fan of the pick. And the reason for that isn't because he isn't a good player. It's because of my expectations for him vis-a-vis what the NBA expects from guards. Over the course of his 4 seasons with Houston, and factoring in also the fact that there is a shorter three-point line in college, Jamal Shead was shooting just under 30% from 3 on 3 attempts per game. So he was a college senior. He was shooting the 3. 3 attempts per game is not an insignificant amount, and he was shooting a low percentage. So you had a large sample size with a good volume of shots in which he was underperforming. And for you to be a good NBA guard these days, it's almost a prerequisite that you need to be able to shoot the 3. There are very, very few guards within the NBA who are rotation caliber players who cannot shoot the 3. So the Toronto Raptors, I think, have a lot of confidence in their ability to be able to develop players' jump shots. I think that they have a lot of confidence in their development programs that can take a player, perhaps a Jamal Shead, who has all of these intangibles and all these interesting things about his game, and work on their jumper and turn them into a good jump shooter. And so far, I mean, he started off the season missing a lot of 3s, but as the season has progressed, his shot has gotten better and better, and now he is shooting 35% from 3 on a good volume of attempts. So 3 per game in only 17 minutes per game, which averages out to about 5 attempts per game per 36 minutes. So that is very interesting. Why don't we take a look at who Jamal Shead is? It's always very compelling because the NBA is a wins and losses league, but it's also personal journeys. You know, that you have parasocial relationships with these players. So it's always very nice to get a look at the background of these players and what they're able to accomplish and what their story was before they get to the NBA. So let's get into that a little bit. So Jamal Shead grew up in a small suburb outside of Austin, Texas. This is what's very interesting about him, is because everywhere he went, he was a winner. So in high school, he led them to a district title. He won a bunch of MVP awards, and he was a 3-star recruit entering college, so he wasn't one of the most highly recruited players, and he decided to go to the University of Houston, and I think he was recruited by a couple of other places as well, but he decided to go with Houston. He didn't do much in his rookie year, but his subsequent seasons, he started to emerge as a kind of winning player, a guy who, if you put him on the floor, you are going to see the benefits of his game, his craftiness, his defensive tenacity, his understanding of the game. He was promoted to the starting lineup, and they kind of went on a run. In the ACC, they were the top team, and they also won the tournament in the ACC. And in the NCAA tournament, March Madness, Shead was very good. 15 points per game, and they went to the Elite 8. They upset Arizona. It was a really good moment for their college, and he was a huge part of that. So he continued to grow in his junior season. He won the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, and he didn't draw enough interest in that draft class, probably because of what I was speaking about earlier, so he decided to go back for a senior year at Houston, and they shifted to the Big 12, and Jamal Shead was again fantastic. He won the Big 12 Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. They won the regular season title. So this guy has an amazing resume, okay? But he had some things working against him from a draft standpoint. So a lot of people look at this and be like, well, how could he have gone 45th in the draft? The NBA draft is filled with winners and guys with a lot of potential. And there are a lot of upperclassmen who win and are extremely successful at the collegiate level that enter the draft, and for one reason or another are simply not seen as very good NBA prospects. So there's a guy that you might know, Luka Garza, who is like unbelievable in college. One of the best players, during his tenure in college, but arguably the best player. And just because of his defensive limitations within the NBA, his size, foot speed, etc., he was seen as not a very good prospect for the NBA. And to be honest, I mean, he has kind of been a role player in Minnesota and has done okay as a bench player, but it was correct of him not to be a highly drafted player. And that's kind of what happened with Jamal Shead. So there are a couple of things that were working against him when it came to him being drafted. The first of which is his size. He is undersized even at the point guard position. He is generously listed at 6 feet. He's kind of like Fred VanVleet in that regard, where Fred VanVleet, as we know, is a very good defender, but is under 6 feet tall. He's also listed at 6 foot, and he's probably not 6 feet tall. Same with Jamal Shead. And 6 feet is, I keep saying Mendoza line about a bunch of different things. Mendoza line just basically means the cutoff that people have in their brains when it comes to either a certain percentage or a height or something. 6 foot is kind of the Mendoza line in basketball. If you're under 6 feet, you have to be like a phenomenon in order to be successful in the NBA. But he is probably under 6 feet tall, so that's one thing working against him. The other thing is the fact that he was not a very good shooter in college. So with those two things combined, despite his very good resume, he slid all the way to 45 in the draft, and the Toronto Raptors selected him, and I was kind of down on the pick because of those two things. And so I have had to eat a little bit of crow, which I am happy to do. I like Jamal Shead. I'm happy for his success, so I don't mind being wrong in these kinds of circumstances. But he has come on lately, and he has impressed me both statistically and also in terms of things that he does that don't necessarily show up in the stat sheet. And the way that he does things is very impressive to me. So first of all, let's look at some of the stats. So Jamal Shead was very good at the beginning of the season. He had a couple of double-digit scoring games. Also in preseason, he looked really strong. I was really liking what I saw from him in preseason. But then he hit some bumps on the road. And his shooting percentages after the first 22 games, he's at 44 games now, so we'll look at the first 22 games. And he was shooting under 40% from the field, and he was shooting 32% from three, and averaging just under 5 points per game. And this all came in just under 15 minutes per game. In the second half of the season, things are looking a lot rosier for him. The percentages have recovered considerably. He is scoring just under 7 points per game in about 20 minutes. He's shooting 44% from the field and 37% from three on just under 3 attempts per game. And one of the big things is his assists. His assists have gone up. His assist to turnover ratio is over 2, so he is averaging 4.2 assists and 1.6 turnovers. So that is always good to see when you have a player who can average quite a few assists and not turn the ball over willy-nilly. I mean, that's just a number on a screen. So let's just talk about kind of what I'm seeing from him from a playmaking standpoint, because when it comes to shooting, a lot of it is the percentages. You take a shot, you can examine how it looks, but a lot of it is simply, does it go into the hole or not? And his has gone into the hole a little bit more than it did at the beginning of the season. I think his stroke looks pretty good, clean, compact. He's getting it off pretty quickly, so no complaints there. But let's talk about his playmaking, because I think that's kind of where he has shown me something a little bit more special. And I know that he's been a good point guard, both in college and high school. He has run his team very well, and he knows how to pick his spots, when to attack, when to pass the ball. He knows his options, where players are, and his passing accuracy is very good. That is one thing that I've noticed from him. So he has a teammate that kind of underscores that and makes it a lot more apparent, is Davion Mitchell, who I like. I like Davion Mitchell. I think he's a good leader in the locker room, a great defender. But one of the things with him is that his passing accuracy is not very good, and his ability to read the floor when it comes to making passes leaves something to be desired. And that is not the case with Jamal Shead. So when he drives into the lane, he's very good at understanding where his teammates are and the defense is. And his passes, once he draws an extra defender or he sees someone cheating off of a shooter or a cutter, he's very, very, very good at finding those players open and getting them the ball and getting them on the hands. That's a super important thing about the NBA is pass accuracy. You want to be able to create the best possible scoring opportunity for your teammates. And the way that you do that is by getting them the ball quickly and hitting them on the hands so that they can get into their shooting motion without any delay. Because if you take a look at how players shoot when shots are uncontested, when they're a little contested, when they're closely contested, most players have a sliding scale where they shoot very well when they're uncontested, decently when they're slightly contested, and then poorly when they're closely contested. So if you can get the ball to your teammates when the defender is far enough away and they can get into their shooting motion quickly, you're way more likely to create a scoring opportunity. And so pass accuracy really matters when it comes to that. And, the speed and decision making and the ability to get it out quickly, he's very good at all of that sort of stuff. And the decision making that he has is high level. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing. On the defensive end, we got to talk about that as well. He's come on lately. He has been one of the more disruptive players on the Toronto Raptors on the perimeter. And he has some competition there. Davion Mitchell is another very good defender, and I think at this point in his career is the superior defender to Jamal Shead. But that does not mean that Jamal Shead is a slouch. It means that Davion Mitchell is very, very good, and Jamal Shead isn't there yet. But he is still good at pressuring the ball. He is still good at tracking players around on the perimeter, and his height is an issue when it comes to players pulling up and shooting. There are issues if a player is good off of the dribble and can pull up and shoot. Some of the time, smaller players are not going to be able to contest that shot as well as larger players. So that could be a problem for him for his career, but guards can still contribute in a lot of different ways. One way is drawing offensive fouls through illegal screens. He is learning from the best in Davion Mitchell, and he has done that so far in his career. And another thing is with deflections. Steals and deflections are another big part of a team's defense, and I think that he has been contributing there, and he can continue to contribute there. So really liking what I'm seeing from him on both sides of the ball, and I think that just from the eye test standpoint, he has delivered. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from him, and I think the Raptors could have gotten a steal here. I think that this might be another scouting and development win for the Toronto Raptors. Really eager to see this guy's career play out. I'm very happy that the Toronto Raptors have drafted Jamal Shead. So, he had a good game last night against the New York Knicks. So maybe this is a good opportunity to get into the player evaluations for last night. Starting off, I think we will go to Jacoby Walter. And this is a big surprise. Jacoby Walter started this game because RJ Barrett had that really scary fall in his last game against the Clippers. He is dealing with concussion protocols, so heal up RJ. Hope it's nothing serious. But Jacoby filled in admirably. He was wonderful in last night's game and was one of the reasons that the Toronto Raptors were able to make it close in the fourth quarter. And let's just read off the stat sheet because it is impressive. 13 points on 7 shots. He was 5 of 7 from the field, 3 of 4 from 3, so his shot was going, looked great. 0 free throws, 1 rebound, 0 assists, 2 steals, and 2 turnovers. And one thing that you really have to give him credit for is in the first half of the game, he was guarding Josh Hart. And Josh Hart didn't have a good half-court game, pretty much only managed to score in transition. He was 7 of 17 from the field for 15 points. And Jacoby, in transition, it's kind of an all-hands-on-deck situation. It's not like a man-to-man situation. You just pick up whoever is in front of you. And so he wasn't responsible for the points that Josh Hart got. But in the half court, he was gapping him sufficiently. He was cutting off his drives to the basket, doing a good job there. But the critical thing that he was doing on the defensive end was guarding Jalen Brunson in the fourth quarter. He had a number of possessions against Jalen Brunson in the fourth quarter where he was very effective in cutting him off going to the basket. So he was credited with 2 steals this game. One of the best steals was in transition. Mikal Bridges had the ball and was kind of just lazily dribbling it up. I think he was trying to slow it down to get into their half-court set, but Jacoby Walter came up from behind him and picked his pocket. He looks good defensively. I like his foot speed. I like his understanding of when to come and help. I think that he has a lot of potential on that end, and he has the potential to be a two-way player. And he was looking sharp on offense as well. I think he was finding his spots and shooting with confidence. He had a really nice off-the-dribble three-point shot. He did a small dribble combo into a pull-up jump shot. That looked great. He had a couple of shots where he just kind of walked into his shot. I think this kid has a lot of potential, and I'm really seeing what the Raptors brass saw in him, which is two-way potential, shot creation ability off of the dribble, and an understanding of how to play the game. And obviously his age. He's still a very young player, and he has a lot of potential. Really love what I saw from him this game, and he was one of the reasons it was close in the fourth quarter. So good job, Jacoby Walter, and congrats on making the top of this list. I know he's just dying to hear from me. So yeah, congrats there. Next up, we'll go with Scottie Barnes next, because even though he had an inefficient game, and even though I don't think it was his best defensive game, I think he did enough here. I think that his playmaking was good. I think that he had a couple of nice turnaround jump shots that went in. I think the offensive process was pretty good, even though he shot 5 threes. He was 1 of 5 from 3. But before we start harping on him for taking bad shots and having a bad shot diet, 2 of the shots were at the very end of the game when the Toronto Raptors were desperate to make a 3-point shot. And it was a low clock situation where somebody had to take the shot, and he was one of them. They kept getting offensive rebounds and feeding it to him, and he took the shots. This is not to be, don't be concerned about this. That's not, you see 1 of 5 and you think, oh, he was jacking up shots. Not the case this game. I think that if he, a lot of these shots were just came where he needed to. I think one of them was even a heave. Throw that out the window. He was a little bit more efficient than you would assume, judging by these stats. When it was in the meat of the game, like the actual game was being played, he was more efficient than the stats would lead you to believe. 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, 3 turnovers. I think this was a mediocre game from him, and I don't think a lot of players in the starting lineup played very well. So, somebody has to come second here, and I'll just give it to Scottie Barnes, because I think he does bring a lot on both ends of the floor. Next up, we'll go to Grady Dick. Grady Dick had a pretty good night from a scoring perspective, and he does, it's a mixed bag on defense. So we'll go with the stats. First of all, he had 14 points on 8 shots. He was very efficient this game. He was 2 of 4 from 3. You love to see that. He was 4 of 4 from the free throw line, and I think that's an underrated part of his game. I think he can draw fouls by getting to the basket. He had 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, and 2 turnovers, so pretty decent floor game. And on the defensive end, there are 2 things going on here. First of all, I am impressed with his help defense. I think that his basketball IQ on that end is high. He knows where he's supposed to be, and he digs in on certain possessions. So if there are players who are trying to drive to the basket, he's good at reading that and providing a little bit of extra help and digging in at the ball when a player is driving to the basket and then recovering to the perimeter. Another good thing that he does, and I've mentioned this in prior videos, is Xing out. So he is taking on one of the responsibilities of perimeter defenders, which is to locate where the shot is going to be coming from, if there is a kick out, and then providing help defense in that spot. And what I've mentioned about Grady Dick is that his forward, his north-south foot speed is actually pretty good. So he can get going when he's moving forward. The problem is the east-west. His lateral foot speed isn't very good. But when it comes to running out and challenging shooters on the perimeter, he's pretty good at that. So I want to mention that before I get into the downsides. One of the downsides this game is that the Knicks were attacking him off of the dribble, and he wasn't able to contain penetration very well. They would use screens. There were a couple of plays with Mikal Bridges. He was getting run off of screens, and Mikal Bridges was shooting open jump shots. So still a concern there. He had to guard Jalen Brunson some of the time, and that wasn't that pretty. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't very good. And then unfortunately, in transition, when a player is able to get up to full speed, he kind of turns into a statue. And Josh Hart beat him a couple of times in transition. So I would say a negative, but slightly negative defensive performance from Grady Dick, but a very positive offensive performance from him. Hitting shots. He was also key to the Raptors' comeback with some timely shooting. He hit a very clutch 3 to bring it, I think, within 2. I think this was a good game from him, a step in the right direction. Anyway, moving on, we'll go to Emmanuel Quickley. He had a good statistical night. He had 9 points on 5 shots. He was 1 of 3 from 3-point range. He had 2 free throws, 1 rebound, 5 assists, 1 steal, 1 turnover. He is being very productive in limited minutes, so he only played 21 minutes this game. He's on a minutes restriction. I feel like the Raptors weren't playing very well with him on the floor, and I don't know if that's his problem. I think that he wasn't doing a very good job guarding Jalen Brunson. I think that Jamal Shead was doing a better job in that regard. So there is that. I think that his ability to contribute on offense, I think that there's something there. I think that his shooting ability is still very much in demand for the Toronto Raptors. But it's hard to get a great look at him when he's playing so few minutes. In certain circumstances, I'm seeing him and I'm really liking what I'm seeing. In other circumstances, you're starting to see some of the flaws in his game. Yeah, once the minutes restriction comes off, then we're going to get a better picture of him. And speaking of which, Jakob Poeltl played 15 minutes in the first half of the game, and then he sat for the remainder of the game with a hip pointer, and he looked really bad this game. Cat is one of the most agile like a cat, I guess it makes sense, bigs in the NBA, and he has a whole array of very decisive, quick moves on the perimeter. And I feel like in other games, Jakob Poeltl was doing a good job moving his feet and staying with Cat, but in this game he was not, and Cat was kind of beating the crap out of him, getting to the basket and scoring, out-rebounding him, scoring around him. It was not a good night for Jakob Poeltl. And when he sat for the second half, it kind of made a bit of sense. They said he has a hip pointer. So yeah, kind of a disappointing night for him, especially from an injury standpoint. So let's go to the bench. We'll start right off with the guy I started the video with, Jamal Shead. Thought he had a fantastic game, 16 points on 12 shots. He was 1 of 4 from 3, 1 of 1 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 9 assists. Yahoo! What a great game. And only 2 turnovers. So he was very effective this game. And all of the things that I was talking about being able to get into the paint, create for others, and score at the rim, I think he was really testing the New York Knicks interior defense by getting to the rim over and over and over again. I thought he was really driving the car when it came to the comeback. He was making the plays. Somebody compared him on social media to Kyle Lowry. And I saw it. Scary. It's blasphemous even. But I saw that kind of impact from him. So really impressive performance from him last night. We've already discussed what he brings to the table, so I'm not going to go too far into depth, but really liked what I saw. So next up, let's talk Kelly Olynyk, because he had to kind of step into the game in Jakob Poeltl's absence and play quite a few minutes. I think he stepped up big time this game. I think that he was really effective on defense. We'll talk about his defense first. He is so sneaky and crafty and just plays with a lot of grift. You love it when a player like that is on your team. He's going to get the most out of things that the refs can't see. He is so crafty at being able to swipe at the ball. He had a legit steal on Cat, and the Toronto Raptors threw away their challenge early, literally just threw the challenge into the wood chipper. And Kelly Olynyk in the second half got a clean strip on Karl Anthony Towns, and they didn't have their challenge, so they couldn't do anything about it. He got called for a foul. But I thought that he was really effective. Let's read off the stat sheet. 11 points on 7 shots. He was 1 of 3 from the 3-point range. 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 turnovers. I thought he just had a really solid game on both ends. I think he was doing a good job of helping. And his rim defense isn't great. He's not good at challenging shots around the rim, but what he is good at doing is stepping up and getting in between the penetration and the basket. So he's not stopping players shooting around the basket, but he's not going to block your shot that often. But what he is doing is stepping in front of players and cutting off the penetration, and then using his super skill on the defensive end is using his hands. He is the handsiest defender I've ever seen, which helps him make up for some of his other defensive shortcomings. But I think he did a really good job this game. And, he's continuing to show that, he's a valuable piece for maybe a contender. Who knows? Next up, we'll go to Bruce Brown. I think he had a really good game, too. In the interest of brevity, I'm not going to go too far into it. He had 9 points on 6 shots. He was 1 of 2 from 3, playing good defense, just kind of doing it all and really contributing, helping off of the bench, and being a steadying force. Liked what I saw from him. Ochai Agbaji, pretty much ditto. 7 points on 5 shots. He was 1 of 3 from 3. 3 rebounds, a steal, a block. God, he had a sick block where he elevated and rejected Miles McBride right at the rim. The guy has been showing off his athleticism recently. Love to see it. I thought he had a really good game. And last but not least, we'll talk about Jonathan Mobo, because he has been inserted back into the lineup, getting some playing time. He had 4 points, which is not that impressive, but it was on 2 of 3 shooting. He had a nice and one opportunity. He had 3 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block, played with a lot of energy, and had some nice sequences, especially in the second half of the game. So I liked what I saw from him. Overall, this game was very unbalanced. This was not a one-sided game, and you can see in the score that it was a lot closer, because the Toronto Raptors bench really kind of bailed them out this game. The Knicks have a terrible bench, and they play a very short rotation as a result, and they were actually starting one of their best bench players in Precious Achiuwa due to OG Anunoby being injured, and so they're very light off of the bench. And the Raptors took advantage of that with their bench group and their young guys who were able to come in and play with a ton of energy and get the score a lot closer. And with Jakob Poeltl having a bad game and RJ Barrett being out, they leaned very heavily on the reserves, and they came up for them and made the game close. In the third quarter, it was, a gong show. They were getting absolutely bullied by the Knicks. They were getting outmatched physically under the basket. In transition, it was a disaster. Offensive rebounds, horrible. They were losing the possession battle, which the Toronto Raptors have been okay at this season. They've been good at winning the possession battle, but they were getting their butts kicked. Precious Achiuwa and Karl Anthony Towns had really big nights in the rebounding department. So that was kind of tough, and they dug themselves into a hole that they tried to claw their way out of, and they got very close in the fourth quarter. But in the end, it just really came down to the Knicks being able to, rely on their, star veterans, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns. Those guys were able to deliver in clutch moments, and they walked away with the victory. The Toronto Raptors are finally getting into a tough part of the schedule. So they won 8 of 10 before this game, but now they're going to start getting into some very difficult games. The Knicks are one of them, but up next they play the Grizzlies today, and they will be in Toronto for that, and the Grizzlies have been very good this season, 34-16. They've been so recently, but the Raptors are pretty shorthanded, and the Grizzlies are a very good team. So we'll see if they're able to make this a competitive game, whether they're able to surprise them like they did with the Clippers, who are also good. We'll have to see. I think it depends on who's still on the team, because the trade deadline is rapidly approaching. They might be trading some players, and also who's healthy. Who knows how Jakob Poeltl is going to be with that hip pointer. If he's out, probably not looking very good. But yeah, that is the video. Let me know about Jamal Shead. Do you see what I see? Do you think that he could be a contributor for the Toronto Raptors moving forward? Let me know what your thoughts are about the trade deadline. If you are excited for the Toronto Raptors maybe making a big move, let me know here in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to Toronto Raptors fans. We are the best. I love answering your questions and responding to your comments. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe the video. We're doing very well with subscribers. Lots of people are coming on board. I want this content to get out there, and you can help other people find this content by liking and subscribing. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.